The wonderful, wonderful Stellenbosch. This, I am told on good authority, is where the very first bottle of Pinotage was bottled. Landsrijk Wine Estate, obviously a heritage and a story dating back to 1692. My name is Africa Melane. It's my joy and pleasure to be your host this afternoon with this reflection on the annual review for Wesgro for 2019 and 2020. I'm a newsman, those of you who listen to Cape Talk and 702. As much as I'd love to tell you about what's happening at the Zondo Commission, where Zuma's lawyers, Advocates Kukuza, is desperately trying to convince the Commission why the Deputy Chief Justice, Raymond Zondo, should recuse himself. I'd love to tell you what's happening in Malawi, where the Bushiris decided to escape to, and then instruct and give conditions, 5 conditions as to how and when they're going to return to South Africa. Instead, let me tell you about the incredible SpaceX Crew Dragon that is en route to the International Space Station as we speak, carrying with it 4 astronauts, 3 of them from the US, 1 of them from Japan. It's going to be the first time in more than a decade, I think, where we're going to have 7 people, astronauts, on board the International Space Station. And one of the things they'll be experimenting on is whether or not they can grow radishes while up there. And it's important because if you are going to have deep space missions, we need to be able to grow our own food, apparently, so that we can eat and survive. And of course, it's important to us because Pretoria-born Elon Musk is the owner of the company that is responsible for all of that. We wish them well. They will be docking 11 p.m. Eastern Time, which is in a few hours' time. The purpose of today is to reflect on the work that has been done by Wesgro in 2019, 2020. Some of their money, of course, is public money, which means you need to hold them accountable. And we will, later in the program, hear from Tim Harris, the CEO of Wesgro, and his team, reflecting on the work that they've delivered for you and the people of the Cape and Cape Town for the last, for the financial year under consideration. What they will also do, though, is reflect on the work that Wesgro has been doing since the 1st of April for the 6 months up until whenever 6 months is later. And I'm looking forward to that, Tim, because I know it's been an extraordinary, unbelievably disrupted year. And as frustrating as it has been, I'm sure there are opportunities that you and your team have managed to take advantage of. We're also 2 days away from the Presidential Summit, which is going to happen virtually this year because of COVID-19. And our keynote address is from Dr. Ramokgopa, who's the head of the Investment and Infrastructure Office in the Presidency. He holds the unenviable task of raising 100 billion rand that the President has promised the people of South Africa. But before that, of course, we'll hear from the Vice Chair of the Wesgro Board, Mike Spicer, Alderman James Foss, who's en route and stuck on the N1, unfortunately. Mayoral Member for Economic Opportunities and Assets with the City of Cape Town. We'll slot him in when he arrives. And of course, Minister David Maynier, MEC for Finance and Economic Opportunities. Before we invite the speakers onto the lectern, just a couple of house rules. If I may ask that you keep your cell phones and tablets on silent or vibrate. I appreciate that this is a working lunch and you will obviously need to respond to elements coming from work as long as they do not disturb our functioning on this podium. We can ask you also to share whatever information is that I suppose titillates you by using the hashtag CapeConfidence. It's going to be throughout the afternoon. You can go to wesgro.co.za for a detailed annual review as well as the annual report, which involves a lot of numbers, which the team will more than happily answer some of your questions too. If you'd like to use the restrooms, you get out of the door, you go left, and then you go right just behind the bar, and you'll see the restrooms marked clearly for male and females and people with disabilities. For those who like to smoke, you'll need to get out of the cellar master into the garden, and you see on the left some high cocktail tables. That is the area that has been designated for smoking. I think I've covered all of that. Of course, we are also live streaming this particular event. Those of you joining us via Vimeo, thank you very much for taking the time out this afternoon. You too will be able to ask questions of our speakers, particularly our keynote address from Dr. Ramokgopa. All you have to do is go to Ask the Question or Ask Question tab on Vimeo, and our team here will be able to process your question, and we'll go through as many of those as possible, as are you obviously more than welcome to ask questions when you have them. So, first up, for the official welcoming remarks and a message from the board, please welcome Mike Spicer, Vice Chairperson for Wesgro Board. Want to be more generous. He's paying for your lunch.
Thanks very much indeed, Africa, for that introduction. You've invited us to share any titillating things, and I can share with you, as the Americans say, something about radishes that caught my attention. Ever since I had a really rather unfortunate culinary endeavor trying to make a radish salad, I cannot stand or abide even the word radish salad. There was a frisson as I heard you say that. So it is my pleasure to formally welcome all the guests of honor as well as the rest of the audience. Guest of honor and keynote speaker, as you heard, Dr. Kgosientso Ramokgopa, Head of the Investment and Infrastructure Office in the Presidency. Western Cape MEC for Economic Affairs, David Maynier, City of Cape Town, Alderman James Voss, partners from the public and private sector, and all the friends of Wesgro, as well as the Wesgro staff. Now, as you know, this has been quite an unprecedented year. We emerged in January this year from a really grueling drought that affected particularly the agricultural sector, but the lives of all the residents of the Western Cape. And no sooner did we emerge than we faced the global COVID-19 pandemic, which affected every single aspect of economic endeavor. And we saw the effects beginning in January internationally, and of course then in March, virtually every country locked down in one form or another. And that meant that the traditional model of activity and Wesgro's way of operating had to change, and had to change very fast indeed. And I think the theme of today's meeting ultimately, and looking back and forward over the past 6 months and the year ahead, is the way that Wesgro has adapted in a very agile way and changed its model of activity to one that makes the full and best use of virtual platforms. What we've seen there is that, as always, challenge has a flip side, and that is opportunity. So by using these tools and using them collaboratively, pulling together partners right across the public and private sector, perhaps best epitomized in the Air Access project, but not only there, in the new cruise terminal and many, many other endeavors, Wesgro has continued to bat for all the economic players in the public and private sector throughout this very challenging year. And I do think, and I must pay tribute to Tim and his staff, they have been remarkable in continuing to grow and defend this economy during these most exacting of times. As you know, of course, the range of activities that Wesgro is involved with spans not only investment, trade, import, export, film, tourism, and a range of other activities. And all of those have had significant impacts, but also, as Tim will share with you when he unveils with his team some of the results, a great number of really quite remarkable performances in the various units of Wesgro. So once again, I want to close by thanking all our partners, our shareholders, firstly Premier Alan Winde, Executive Mayor Dan Plato, MEC David Maynier, and Alderman James Voss. Your support for the agency through these very trying times has really been fantastic, and we thank you very much indeed. because this is a collaborative partnership, and we rely on funding from you as well as from the private sector. And we hope very much that you will feel that Wesgro has given you bang for your buck, so to speak. I must also thank all the members of the board for helping give guidance to the team at Wesgro over the past year. You have been of great support, and you have been part of the outcomes. And finally, I want to thank Tim Harris and all of his staff for their sterling contribution through the year and for the leadership that they have epitomized. So there, by way of introduction and thanks to all of you, I want to now call on Dr. Kgosientso Ramokgopa to come and give us the keynote address at this AGM. Thank you. Kgosi.
Thank you very much, Deputy Chair. Let me take the opportunity to extend my warm and sincere greetings to Honorable MEC Maynier, also to Alderman Force, to Tim, the CEO of Wesgro, and let me greet you all in your eminence. I must say that we really are excited to be here. I was just sharing with Tim earlier on that I think the possibility of us engaging with you is most welcome, because we really want to broaden the flow of engagement, and we want to ensure that in the work that we are doing, there's high levels of alignment from the provincial perspective and the national perspective, so that we are able to aggregate our efforts, and in that way we should be able to achieve a whole lot more. I mean, over the past 6 months, we have developed, if you like, a communion with the private sector, and that has yielded spectacular results, and I'll share with you what those results are about. And I think if there's one silver lining from the dark cloud, that is the devastation of the pandemic, is really to force that alliance, public-private sector alliance. I think we have been able to forge greater working relationship between ourselves and the private sector. And in this instance, really I'm referring to the funding fraternity, the multilateral development banks, the commercial banks, and the DFIs. And I'll share with you the nature of the collaboration and the kind of achievements that we have attained to date, and also how we see the future going forward. I'm going to use the aid of a presentation just to run you through really the work that we are doing, and really we are beginning to position a more solid, deliberate and orchestrated relationship with Wesgro. I was sharing to Tim and the team that we have already initiated it at the provincial level with DG Malila and his team. We have already engaged Mayor Plato, and Alderman Force was part of those engagements. And I'll share with you where those engagements are, but we think that we can achieve something considerably better if we were to deepen the nature of those relationships. I'm just going to run through this really. I'll drop anchor at 1 or 2 slides that I think are of particular interest, especially the ones that talk to the new funding dispensation. I'm sure we are all familiar with the fact that the fiscal matrix has deteriorated. The fiscal returns, have contracted. We know that we've been relegated to sub-investment grade. The debt to GDP continues to rise, and also the deficit is projected to rise. So that's the deterioration of the fiscal matrix. So there's a need for us to explore innovative funding instruments. I'll share with you what some of those instruments are and how best we can collaborate going forward. And we know that with the arrival of the pandemic, we have had to reprioritize. So there's greater focus that is placed on ensuring that you keep businesses alive, but also you are able to ensure that poor households are able to have a decent meal. And that has undermined, if you like, investments into infrastructure. So we'll share with you how we see that. So I'll drop anchor when I get to that point. So just to introduce the office really, where investments and infrastructure, and as the office located in the Presidency, and as the name suggests, we've got two primary mandates. The first one is around the investment effort, the investment drive. The President has made a public pronouncement that is desirous of attracting about $1 billion US into the country for the term of the 6th administration. And he has, in this regard, I think, appointed 7 envoys. These are eminent men and women who have served the country with distinction. Some of them have led some of the marquee JSE-listed entities. Some of them were previously in the executive, so these will be ministers. And the President hopes that will be able to benefit from the social and political currency that they've accumulated over time, so that they are able to tap into their networks and help with that investment drive. So we're coordinating that effort. We are at the forefront. And as the Deputy Chair, Mr. Spice, has indicated, we also are at the forefront of the South Africa Investment Conference. So this is the 3rd installment of that investment conference. Obviously, it's going to take a hybrid approach because of the requirements of the pandemic. But also from a content point of view, it's less about the public pronouncements, pledges by private sector. As you can imagine, what the pandemic has done is that the liquidity that existed before is looking more inward. So there's very little available, although in some spaces there is some degree of liquidity. I'll speak to that, especially as it relates to financing green infrastructure initiatives. So really it's about providing a balance sheet of what we have achieved over the past 2 installments of the investment conference. And I was saying that we're still battling from transition pledges into actual investments into the economy, and that success rate is about 27%. We really want to get it significantly higher, above the 50% mark. So that's the work that we're doing, and on the infrastructure front really is to ensure that we're able to produce a credible and robust infrastructure project pipeline. But the originators of the pipeline and the primary sponsors is local authorities, SOE, provincial governments, and entities like Wesgro. So we are not the ones who originate, really, if you come to think of it. Is that collaboration that I spoke about earlier on. So the need for us to develop solidaristic relationships so that we are able to forge a relationship that can help us to replenish that project pipeline. I'm making the point because if you talk to the funding institutions, they'll tell you that all good projects that can be funded have been funded. So the problem is us producing a credible project pipeline. And in this instance, when I talk about a credible project pipeline, I'm talking about those projects that are underpinned by credible, independent and sustainable revenue streams, not the ones that are searching for funding through the fiscus, and I'll illustrate how we make that separation. And then we are also working on the ease of doing business. This is a World Bank measure, really. It's got about 11 indicators. It talks to issues about the speed with which you are able to issue permits, working permits, licensing requirement at the local authority level, occupation certificate. I think we are ranking about 82 of 192 participating countries. And really the intention is to ensure that we get to the top 50 in the world. And I think that engagements with outfits like Wesgro are going to help us to ensure that the country is able to achieve that. And this slide really is essentially the problem statement, the kind of problem that is confronting the country. And I'm using the lens of infrastructure, so I've narrowed it. I'm sure the problem statement is much more complex than this, but for the purposes of the domain of our responsibility. So the first one is just an acknowledgement that the National Development Plan, which is essentially a blueprint for development in the country, articulates aspirational targets that ideally should be achieved by 2030. We know we're far off from that because of both the objective and subjective reasons. So it will talk to issues around universal access. So here I'm talking about clean potable water that is available as and when people need it at the right quantity at the household level. And I'm sure you know there are many parts of the country that where people are still fetching water from water bodies they are sharing with with animals. So that's the kind of problem that is confronting us. And we think that is an indictment on the democratic state. So we need to ensure that we achieve those targets. It talks to the levels of unemployment. I think it places it at about not more than 6%, but we know that we have hit now about 30%, if you like. If you look at youth unemployment, we're around 61%. So this is a perfect storm. It's something that can undermine the country's national security. So it is important that we work with speed to resolve these questions. So those are the aspirational targets, and it also says that the economy must grow by 5.5% year on year. You know, we are far away from that. So if you look at the economic reconstruction and recovery plan that was unveiled by the president some few weeks ago, the president said it's got these 5 objectives. There are 7 interventions that he states there. And if we were to perfectly achieve all of that over a 10-year period, the economy might grow by 3%. So you can see that we are far off the mark in relation to what those aspirational targets. But this is the point I want to make. So those are the aspirational targets, but there is things that must happen upstream of those aspirational targets. And one of them is something called gross fixed capital formation, and really is a level of investments into the economy. So you can see that we are sitting at around 18% of that, and when the target essentially is 30% of GDP, we are sitting at 18%. And then we can also see that that the expenditure in the public sector has not been exemplary. So we are underspending by about 33 billion per annum as the 3 years of government. So this is what you can see over the MTF period. And who are the major culprits? So national departments really are not the big spenders. They account to up to 6%. So your problem sits here, the SOEs, provincial government and local government. And there's a combination of factors why that is the case. And some of those problems, they are objective problems really. The capacity of the state, and I'm talking about the technical and financial engineering capacity of the state, has been hemorrhaged over a period of time. So the design, the quality of projects is such that they are of such quality that you can't first implement them. If you get to implement them, there's cost overruns, and also the quality of the product is something that is less desirable. So the state must build that capacity. And then there are issues around the procurement space. It takes an inordinate amount of time for you to make decisions with regards to appointments, but also in instances where you make appointments, it's soiled by malfeasance, leakages, and all of that. So those are things that requires our collective attention. But this is an area that is going to receive great attention. The share of PPPs as a percentage of the infrastructure spend, you can see sitting at 2%. So you need to address that, because I just made the point that the fiscal headspace has diminished. So you need to look at alternative sources of funding. Again, there are reasons there. So you find that from Treasury Approval 1 to Treasury Approval 3, it can take you up to 12 years. I know of a project that just been concluded just before the lockdown. It was started in 2008. In some instances, over a 12-year period, some of the assumptions that underpin the projects are no more valid, have deteriorated. So the state must improve this. So we have diagnosed, if you like, working with the commercial banks, the MDB, what those problems are. And that's why in the president's address of the unveiling of the economic reconstruction and recovery, he talks about something called Operation Vulindlela, which is essentially about the reforms that are necessary to help us to achieve the kind of results that are desirous. So the net result of a combination of underspending in these sectors is that your secondary sectors, construction and manufacturing, have been contracting. Construction has contracted by about, has experienced 7 consecutive quarters of negative growth and contracted by that amount. And this, by the way, predates the pandemic. So you can see that the situation is even more pronounced now. And that's why we're working on stimulating aggregate demand. That's what the build program is about. And hopefully on the back of that, depending on the quality of the investment and the sectors that we have chosen, you are able to stimulate the supply side, so construction, manufacturing, manufacturing, and then you can absorb the kind of labor that is available, and then address unemployment. So that's what we're seeking to address, and we think that working with outfits like yourselves, we should be able to change that picture. And then this is really the kind of areas that we are looking at. We are working at producing a national infrastructure plan. So it will talk to the priority sectors. It will talk to the skills that are required for us to achieve the targets, objectives of the plan. It will talk to the resourcing of the plan. So the default approach now is no more than national fiscals. We need to look at other financing instruments for us to achieve that. So it will articulate what those areas of opportunities are, and then it will talk to the reforms that are necessary. I've spoken about the need for us to continue to produce a pipeline and ensure that we are able to build investor confidence. And then the third area is about investment. I'll speak to that just in a bit, but essentially is about alternative forms of funding. So these are not novel funding instruments. They exist in other parts of the world, but I think in the country we have not fully exploited those. And then it's about execution, and this is the point. I mean, the state, I mean, there's a lot of abandoned projects all over the country, in all the 9 provinces, and that speaks to the capacity of the state to prosecute its responsibility, and we need to build state capacity to do that. And we think that in the interim, you need to work very closely with the private sector to achieve that. And then there's a big portfolio, immovable property that the state has, and we're not sweating those assets. I'll share with yourselves what the thinking is. And then really this, I mean, I won't dwell much into that. So the economics team in the office has done some bit of modeling. And really the point here is to ensure that the interventions are born out of science. I think our relationship, when I say our, I'm talking about public sector in general, our relationship with science has been antagonistic. So it's essentially about emotions. This sector belongs here or there, but there is nothing to substantiate some of the choices that we are making. So we're beginning to introduce science in how we are doing this. We've done some work in terms of the concentration of the economy in the various provinces, or the levels of diversification, alternatively speaking, if you like. So you can see that there is some degree of diversification. I'm talking about the Western Cape. The closer you are to 100, if you like, it means that you are highly concentrated. So you see that there's some degree of diversification. So the team has done that modeling. I'm sure MEC and Alderman, we can sit with team and the team just to take them through what sits behind these numbers. So there's some degree of computation and algorithm that has been developed on that. So we are sharing with the various provinces. I'm sure you can critique this modeling, but essentially is to find each other. When we begin to prioritize sectors, they must be born out of science. And then there is natural advantages that are accumulated by your location, and that's what the quotient seeks to do. So agriculture, forestry, the ones that are highlighted in green, I think, if you like, the Western Cape has got those advantages, if you like, of location. It's a function of a multiplicity of factors, some exogenous, but essentially we are beginning to surface those and demonstrate that if you are to focus in this area, the likelihood of you growing the economy quicker, ensuring that you absorb the supply side, the prospects are significantly higher. Obviously, there could be a strategic decision to say that we want to grow a particular sector, each share of the GDP. That's a strategic political decision. We will support that. We are not in the political space, but in this instance, it's just to generate information science, compute it, generate, or if you like, extract or surface insights, and then share it with yourself going forward. And this is a demonstration of the performance of the various sectors, and in some instances, they follow, if you like, the location quotient. By definition, it should be doing that if you are to use a linear relationship, but it's a bit more dynamic. But we are simply beginning to share with you what if you like, the economic outlook of the Western Cape. So if we want to make tactical, strategic choices, we think that they must be informed by science, but some of it obviously is political experience is not our domain. The political principles in this instance, the MEC and the executive and the MMCs and the mayors, they'll make that determination. All we are saying is that, if you like, this is an instantaneous look of a longitudinal assessment, because it's over a period of time. And then I was sharing with CEO Tim Harris around the work that we've been doing. Earlier on, I did make the point that there's some degree of communion, if you like, an intimate working relationship with the private sector. I'm talking of the multilateral development banks, the commercial banks, and the DFIs. They have supported the office with expertise. So they have sponsored some of illustrious, if you like, professionals in the 6 sectors that we have prioritized. So that's the 4 are what we call the network industries: energy, water, transport, and ICT infrastructure. And the choice of that is because of their job elasticity, the fact that they are able to introduce efficiencies in the economy. They provide opportunities for municipalities to introduce land-based financing mechanisms. They are able to broaden the flow of revenue streams for municipalities. Municipalities are able to reinvest back into the economy. That's what the network industries do. We added agriculture and agro-processing because if you were to look at the level of development in the countries, that the center of gravity of that is the major metropolitan areas. There are 8 metros, if you like, are the ones where there's concentration of this investment. So the problem is that you are going to have unintended consequences of, if you like, entrenching the levels of inequality. I'm talking the dichotomy, urban-rural dichotomy. So that's something that requires our attention. And we think that agriculture and agro-processing gives us a pristine opportunity to resolve that tension for as long as there's value addition upstream, if you like. So if you grow grapes here, this is a perfect example. Value addition is happening here, and therefore you are able to create employment upstream. And then consumption could be in Gauteng, but value addition has happened here. That's the point that we're making with regards to agriculture and agro-processing, and then human settlement. So if you look at the design of how we provide, especially for low-income households, is the sole responsibility of the state. And our argument is that the demand far outstrips supply. And in fact, the situation is going to become more pronounced as a result of a fiscal headspace that is diminishing. So there's less money rather, that is allocated to low-income housing, if you like, and also housing that is 100% subsidized by the state, because there's levels of reprioritization. So our argument is that the private sector could play in that space, and how you do that is to ensure that you exploit the provision of bulk infrastructure to allow for private developers to introduce new housing typologies that accommodate low-income housing. And that's what we have done with Baldwin. I was sharing with the team and my colleagues that there's some 2 or 3 projects of that nature here in the Western Cape. So we can come into that space and address the bulk infrastructure requirements. I'll talk to you how we do that with regards to using the infrastructure fund. So having done that exercise, identify those 6 areas. We then went to mine projects from the SOEs that are in that space. We went to the provinces and we went to the metros because of the sheer size, really. There's over 200 municipalities, so it was going to be an inordinate amount of tasks to have the ambition of going to all municipalities. So we prioritized the metros. We did have an engagement, Alderman, and also the executive mayor here. It's an ongoing conversation, and I'll explain what I mean ongoing conversation. So out of that exercise, we were able to mine 276 of this project. But if you look at the project life cycle, you conceptualize a project, and then you do a desktop study, really, just preliminary investigation to assess the viability of the project. You get to a point where you think this project is promising, then let me go out and do a more comprehensive detailed study. So it's evidence-led, you gather information, that's the feasibility stage. And then once you say it's right, then you get to financial close. So we targeted those projects that are beyond the feasibility, because you are likely going to achieve higher levels of success to get them to financial close. Remember, these are projects that are not competing for funding from the fiscus, but they are underpinned by reliable, if you like, independent and sustainable revenue stream. And we're able to graduate. And then they came to the tune of 2.3 trillion. That's the figure that the president referred to in the speech. And then they were drawn from these sectors, like I've indicated. And then we graduated 50 of them, took them to the Sustainable Infrastructure Development Symposium. Those projects got they got funding from the private sector. Some of them were funded by the private sector. All the private sector wanted was to say, let's take the Mooikloof development, because that's the one that received coverage, and also for other reasons about the ownership level. Let's leave the ownership there. It's a listed entity. I know now they are working on the ownership model. It's an important part, if you like, of transformation. But really, what the project sponsor said, says a 50,000, if you like, mixed-use development. And all that I want is it's to the tune of 34 billion rand, the biggest sectional title development in the world. But I need bulk, and this bulk is a wastewater treatment plant, the capacity of the wastewater treatment plant to accommodate the new usage, and then expanding the capacity of the road is a provincial road to accommodate anticipated future traffic that will be generated by the development. All of that came to about 1.2 billion. So all that we did is that we're providing for the bulk, we are unlocking this development, but please accommodate low-income households there. Not necessarily you are what you call RDP, but those who earn anything between, I think, 5,000 or so and 22,000. And they were able to make a provision of 15,000 of the 50,000 units are going to go to those households. And then we're also able to generate a financial solution, if you like, engineer financial solution using what the finance link individual subsidy scheme, working with the Department of Human Settlement, so that you don't undermine the business case of that development. That's the point I'm making. I was just sharing that with Tim and the team to say that it's possible for us to do that. Of the 276 MEC, is that about the Western Cape, we got about 23, I think. That's the, or is that 33? 23 we got from the Western Cape. And I was saying to the team that just only about 3 or 2 of them were graduated, have received funding. We have not abandoned the rest, the difference. We are working with the private sector to get them to financial close. And I was saying to Tim and the team that we are not close, so there's no cutoff date. So you can submit the project tomorrow, the other day, next year, we'll work with you. But what we want to do, our experience from the first round, the first installment of this is that if the quality of the information is sound, the project's prospects of getting to financial close quicker are significantly enhanced. And that's the point I was making, the collaboration we want to have with Wesgro, obviously provincial and local authorities. We can work together. We have agreed with team that will come back for a more thoroughgoing workshop, will be a bit more granular, deliberate in how we do it, because it's in the collective interest that these projects are able to go. So these are the 3 projects that are receiving funding. The Berg River Fuel Flay Augmentation Scheme, and then the other one is the small harbors. These ones are funded, by the way, so the small harbors, they are funded, so we'll engage with the team. I will not, and then the emergency power procurement. I mean, that's the work that is happening going forward. And I think also the liberalization of the energy space for self-generation, team and Minister Mayor and Alderman, we can work with you, because in that 1 billion rand, 100 billion rand infrastructure fund, there's money that is allocated for project preparation. So we can sit with you as grant, so that you appoint people, expertise, and then we do project preparation so that you are able to benefit from that asset. And then the Cape Town, the Jet A1 pipeline project is also one of those projects that are being funded. And this really, I won't take you through this. We have worked out in real time just to track projects, what we call the presidential war room. And all that we are saying, team, is that we can work with you. You might be far advanced than us. If that's the case, then we can learn from yourselves and see how we can improve this. So it's about us mining the information, following the project, performance of the project, so that MECs, mayors, and MMC, you have at the comfort of your office, on your gadget, you are able to track projects so that you can see that there's a relationship between what has been paid, invoice for the project, and what is the actual performance of the project on the ground. Because in many instances, you only get to know much later after the fact that we have spent money on this project, but the kind of performance on the ground doesn't match the project. We take it further, so it's not about insights on the performance, actual physical performance of the project. It's about generating and developing insights. So essentially the before and after contribution to GDP, the spatial reconfiguration and all of that. So we are doing that. So this is what exists at the Union Building, but we can share with you just outside this and ensure that we are able to address. As I move towards a conclusion, sorry for being long, is that we have, Cabinet has taken a decision. We have about 30,000 land parcels, which constitute about 4.4 million hectares of the total land mass of the country. We have about 94,000 buildings. I'm talking national government, DPWI, the various ministries, and these are buildings that are under the care of DPWI. Some of them are derelict, abandoned, disused, if you like, and some of them are found in the key strategic areas in the CBD. There's one nice one there at the convention center as you go out right there at the back. So we're going to clear that. So that's a building that is bang in the middle of Cape Town, and it belongs to Department of Public Works and Infrastructure. They've hived off all those assets and given them to the office. So we want to have a conversation with you of what is the best use of this. You will know better because we don't want it to be inconsistent with the uses in that space. So we don't want to deteriorate. So, and then there could be multiple other buildings. We want to have conversations with the province, the municipalities to see how best we can work. We are making the assets available. It supports our developmental initiatives. But the problem here is that the state has been working in disparate ways. So there's national government, there's provincial, there's local, when in fact these assets belong to the state. So people can't make this distinction. When they see this building, they just see government has abandoned this building, when in fact the buildings nearby have been improved. So it's not about national, provincial, or local. All they know is that government is not looking after its building. So that's what we want to do. And there are also issues of leases. So what this says is that government is a major tenant. So all that we want to do, some of the leases are month to month. We want to take these leases to beyond 9 years, 11 months. But the condition is that we must improve the quality of the building. So as you improve, you install HVACs, aircons, lifts, you are going to help the recovery of the economy, you are going to employ people, but you know you are guaranteed for the next 15 years. So that's the point that we are making. So we'll sit, like I said, with Team Aldemane and see how best we can do this. Cabinet is expecting us to come not later than March on this solution. So we have compartmentalized these assets, like the ones I was sharing with you in the next to the convention center. If you like, it's a low-hanging fruit. We can go back to cabinet. We have agreed with the Metro of Cape Town. This is how we are going to do it. We are redesigning really the ministerial houses and the estates where MPs are saying, we think that if you can densify, you are likely going to get better returns, you are going to spend less money. But again, there are estates. If you migrate, move them from those estates, what do you do with those assets? The people who are better placed to answer that question is province and the local authority. So we want to sit down and do exactly that. And then we have had, about 2 weeks ago, a project preparation and marketplace roundtable. So essentially here the focus is to ensure that we exert our efforts upstream of the project life cycle so that the quality of the projects lend themselves to be funded through the debt capital market or using the infrastructure fund. So the infrastructure fund is that 100 billion rand facility that is incubated at the DBSA. So really we want to crowd in private sector participation. Those are the various permutation of blended financing. But the one that I want to highlight, I mean, this one is sovereign guarantees and all of that. The split of debt to equity really. The traditional one is 50-50. With the blended financing mechanism, we could take it to 70-30. Essentially, the state says we are prepared to take the first loss. If there's a funding gap, we'll plug that funding gap. You are de-risking the project. Private sector players are able to come in. And I was saying to Tim and the colleagues that if we work together, I'm sure there are projects you are sitting with that have got a funding gap, they can benefit from the infrastructure fund. And the other one is around Alderman technical assistance, project preparation. We can sit with you and say, these are our priorities. We invest in that to do project preparation so that they get to be bankable. And then the other one is how best to use the grant dispensation. And this is more applicable in the poor rural municipalities. Urban settlements, we think that they've got they have it covered through their urban settlement development grant, but we think that there can be better use of the grant dispensation to help projects to progress into the next stage, and we're able to realize benefits. And then these are some of the instruments I referred to earlier on. Project bond, really. Traditionally, when you raise a bond, people look at the balance sheet of the project sponsor. By project bond, we are isolating the project from the balance sheet of the project sponsor. So you look at the assumptions that are underpinning this project. Remember, it's about reliable, sustainable, independent revenue streams. Just on the strength of that, you are able to fund it. Let me give you a hypothetical example which might not be applicable here, but for purposes of making the point. Let's say the balance sheet of the city of Cape Town was not healthy, but you want to go into generation for self-use. So when the funder comes here, they don't look at the balance sheet of the city, they just look at this asset that you are creating. And if they are off-takers, then they fund that project. That's simply what we mean. The others is green infrastructure bond. There's a big pool of liquidity. When we had the project roundtable, they're going into those spaces, if you like. So banks, we know, they're pulling out of coal, they are looking at renewables, they are looking at gas. Some of it is concessionary. I mean, its genesis is the Paris Climate Accord. They committed the signatories to 100 billion rands of green infrastructure financing by 2020, why 2020, and directed at developing countries. That's all we are saying. And these ones are transformative. So if you want black players to participate in the space, complex, high-value projects, there will need to be project guarantees, if you like. So we are helping, we sit behind them, if you like, so that they are able to participate. I've spoken ad nauseum at project preparation. And this really is a critique of the state. I've spoken about the financial and the technical engineering skills have been hemorrhaged, so we're working with the private sector to do exactly that. The misalignment in the planning cycles and the budget horizons undermines the ability of the state to be able to work in unison. And I think the introduction of the district development model is helping us to address those issues going forward. There are what we call pockets of excellence or efficiency in the state. Wesgro will rank amongst those. So it's about a bureaucracy, that is a professional bureaucracy committed to its work in the most patriotic sense, but also protecting their profession. They are working diligently to make sure that these things happen. So it is important that the state recognize the existence of these pockets of excellence and then an efficiency, and we work with them much closer. That's the point that we are making. As you continue to correct the acts of malfeasance that exist in other parts of the SOEs, doesn't mean that all of them are in that. So it is important that you make that admission. And then there are issues that can undermine this infrastructure bill program. So the president says 1 trillion rand of infrastructure investment to be unblocked over the next 4 years. If you don't have the reliability of energy supply, it's a height of fall. You will not be able to achieve that. That's why generation for self-use, embedded generation, all of that, realizing the provision of the IRP, it is important that you do that. You have to fight corruption, malfeasance, and leakage, project overruns. The private sector is not going to have faith, so we can stand here and say all kinds of things, but when you listen to the the public narrative. Africa spoke about what's happening there, the Zondo Commission and all other places. The common narrative is that there's a lot of leakage, and you have to address that. So decisive action has to be taken. And that's why the president says one of the objectives is to fight crime and corruption. It's important that we do that. Economic sabotage and disruption of construction site. I'm sure the city of Cape Town will have those instances. You are rolling out infrastructure, people just come on the side brandishing guns, we want 30%. I mean, the country can't work like that. And that's why the president spoke about the introduction of a special unit to address that. So that's a one set of conversation. You must deal with the thugs, and that's not this for the police to deal with the thugs. There's a separate conversation that is related to that. It's communities that requires genuine participation. That conversation must be had. As we construct the road, they must participate, they must benefit, all of that across the entire value chain. So we thought that it must be a nuanced conversation. Thugs, they will be dealt by the police, but the need for participation, inclusion, and transformation is a different one. And then the last one is just territorial battles. So we come here, I'm just giving an example. I mean, Tim could have said, no, just go away, this is our space, is Wesgro. Alderman can say, no, we are a constitutional creature, we are a creature of the Constitution, we've got original powers. MEC Maynier can say the same. But all I'm saying is that if we work together, you are likely going to find that we are going to find each other. The constitutional responsibilities, powers notwithstanding, I think the country calls for greater levels of coordination and that. And then we are working on national infrastructure plan. I spoke about it earlier on. And Tim will also working on the country's investment strategy. We are also examining the areas that have attracted FDIs. We've got over 70 investment promotion bodies in the country. I mean, you are going to undermine a single coherent narrative about investment in the country. Obviously, it's going to have a provincial and local government nuance, but it must be pulled together by an overarching, if you like, articulation of what that investment strategy is about. That's what we are doing, and in that engagement that we are proposing to have with Tim, and the team will share greater levels of details and see how we were able to do it forward. And then we have mapped our competitive advantages, efficiency-seeking investments. So we have disaggregated the quality and the nature of the investments when investors comes into that space. So we will share with the team. I'm sure you've got the matrix that you are using. We can benefit from that. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Round of applause, please. Very much, Dr. Ramokgopa. By the way, I had Tim's permission to allow you to complete your presentation because we really felt it was rich and complex, and it was important, I think, to set the context of today's review. The presentation will be emailed to you, so if there were a whole lot of things and data and information there that you really wanted to grapple with, we will be emailing you that a little bit later today. The team from Wesgro is already working on a date with the presidency for that workshop, for the granular detail of how we can engage. I promise you there are 1,001 ideas of what to do with Customs House. We've been playing and praying and playing around it for the longest time, and it's good to know that it's now going to be an asset that is going to be available to us. And just in case, like me, you did not know what meritocratic democracy is, it is a political system in which economic goods and or political power are vested in individual people on the basis of talent, of effort, and achievement, and not on wealth and social class, which is really just wonderful wording coming from the presidency. Thank you very much for that. Another round of applause, please, for Dr. Ramokgopa. What I have done in turn is buy back a few minutes from each of the remaining speakers. So all of you, I've taken 2.5 minutes away from your time, but we shall still try and get through the context as much as possible. Coming up next is Alderman James Voss, Mayoral Committee Member for Economic Opportunities and Assets with the City of Cape Town. And while he makes his way up to the lectern, a reminder, at the end we'll try and squeeze in a few of your questions. We'll have microphones for those in the room here at Landsrack in Stellenbosch. And of course, if you are listening to us via Vimeo, we ask you to use the Ask a Question button for your questions for all of our speakers today. James.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Africa, for your introduction and for cutting the speaking time. I must admit, he did WhatsApp me ahead of time, but when he said he's going to cut me by 2 minutes, I said, but it's impossible because Dr. Ramokgopa spoke so passionately about the assets and how we can work together. And so I was really excited about that. And thank you very much for sharing us this very valuable information and also for your cooperation, working with the city, working with the province. But I'll pick up on a few issues now because I do think there's some very valuable insights shared with us today. Then Mr. Spicer, thank you very much for your lovely introduction. But I think I'm going to cut the dignitaries because then I'm going to go really above my time because there are so many important people in the room. But I do want to acknowledge the councillors from our neighbouring jurisdictions. It's really great to see all of you here today. I see many familiar faces in the audience. And of course, it's great to come here today. And I guess this is a year in review that will leave its mark for many years to come. So lots to reflect on, many learnings, many trends to comprehend with. But I think we can all agree the risks are high and the possibilities are there for all to see. And therefore, it's a great pleasure to represent the City of Cape Town here today. And I'm very proud of the work done by the Wesgro team. And I thank all of you for putting the funding that the city provides to good use for the benefit of the people of Cape Town. Because a main priority for us as the City of Cape Town is to generate the right conditions to ensure that we attract investment. You spoke about those investment pipelines. It's important that we also establish those skills pipelines so that we can ensure a labour force that is ready for those high growth sectors in our city so that we can grow our economy and create jobs. And therefore, a key component to achieve this partnership is our relationship with strategic business partners. And I'm very proud to confirm that over the last 6 months, between April and September of 2020, we collectively facilitated more than 8.8 billion rand worth of investment. We created more than 4,800 new jobs, and we trained just over 1,300 people despite the various levels of lockdown. So we've really focused our efforts on being the growth directorate of the City of Cape Town. And this means that we are constantly on the lookout for new ways to grow the depth and the diversity of the city's economic landscape. And so if you ask me, what makes Cape Town and our business ecosystem such a success compared with other cities? Undoubtedly, it is our focus on those catalytic sectors which will drive demand and make business sense. And I see a lot of those important partners here in the audience today. For example, our world-class airport, our well-located harbour, and I must say I do like your phrase about dropping anchor. That was quite clever because our world-class harbour and our airport are two important components of our city's economic geography because those are the two assets that we need to sweat. We need to make sure that we do much more product facilitation, product development, create market access so that we can export more products, services, and goods to those world markets. But also our ability to transact with land. And that's why your speech today, Doctor, really excited me because if we look at the city's land, or government for that matter, our immovable property, our strategic assets, those are the important things that we need to start focusing on as part of our economic readiness and recovery. And so very similar to your program, we are in the city now working on our own optimization. So a second part of my portfolio is asset management. And so that's where we need to get much more optimization out of our assets. Immovable, land, buildings, and other assets, so that we can have a pipeline of disposal. And so we are working out now a strategy to dispose which makes business sense for commerce, for social good, for residential, so that we can really dispose of property that can give us a revenue, but that will also drive demand, so that we can really find out what is that supply and demand dynamic, so that we can get that new equilibrium in our city's economic landscape. So I think that is a really important one where we need to work much closer with all government partners, because that's really going to be the future in terms of smart real estate. And I think those are the things that businesses are also looking forward to. It's the way that we transact, it's the way that we cooperate, so that we can really get going on our economic recovery. And I think also a very important part of our plan is to make sure that we get those investments coming in for now and in the future, so that we can plan ahead. And we need to look at the type of investments that will give us the best return on investment. And as you can see on the screen, or on the picture here in the front about boat building, I mean, we've got about 40 boat building yards in Cape Town. And if you look at our strategic location on the continent, we should be pushing out many more jobs and export. Yes, as it stands, we are the second largest producer of catamarans in the world. But we should do much more to unlock that opportunity from a land perspective, from a skills perspective, but also to do much more on the export, so that we can create more jobs and so that we can really be that go-to city in Africa and beyond. And so boat building is an important sector. Clothing and textile, technology, business process outsourcing, agri-processing, those are the important sectors that we believe will really give us that competitive edge. And of course, our relationship with our strategic business partners are key, so that we can make sure that we create those skills pipelines, those investment pipelines, but then as a city government, to make sure that we've got the right conditions. And when we talk about these enabling environment, what does it really translate to? And that's where we need to be much more smarter. Incentives, our special economic zone, and again, land, making land available for commerce. But if we talk about those incentives, those are the things that really excite me about the future, so that we can cut the cost of doing business and make it much more easier to do business. And that's going to be part of our Ease of Doing Business program going forward, so that as a city, we be much more flexible on the regulatory stuff and much more accommodating for businesses to expand and to retain. And that's why the city came up with an economic action plan that really speaks about our business retention and expansion and our future investments, and to make sure that it's underpinned with proper backup, support, incentives, and working very closely with all of the partners, for example, Wesgro, Provincial Department of Economic Development, and of course the state, because we are all in this together, and it really demonstrates the power of partnerships. So thank you very much again for making the city part of this very exciting journey, and it is really about making sure that it's about the ease of doing business, so that we can really get the things going that matter most to business, that will drive demand, create jobs, and ultimately make business sense. Thank you very much.
Another round of applause, please, for James Foss, Mayoral Committee Member for Economic Opportunities and Assets. And thank you, James, for affording me those 2.5 minutes. Coming up next is a Minister for Finance and Economic Opportunities in the Western Cape Government, Minister David Maynier. And I have no doubt, Minister, you will be bending the ear of Dr. Ramokgopa to see how we can get those projects that have been allocated for the Western Cape a little bit more than the number indicated already. Please welcome MEC Maynier.
Thank you, Africa. You can be sure that I will be doing exactly that. And in fact, I have a meeting with Dr. Ramokgopa after lunch. So you can be absolutely sure that I will be doing exactly that. I think when it comes to the sort of very big infrastructure projects, nothing illustrates the challenge that you face more than the Berlin International Airport. Massive cost overruns, 6 billion euros, significant delays, 14 years in construction. And then, and I can see there are some people that are very interested in connectivity, Of the 100 long-haul flights flying into Germany, 7 fly into Berlin International Airport, which means that if you're traveling from Asia and you want to visit Berlin, you have to fly to Prague and take a bus to Berlin. So nothing illustrates the challenges that you face in delivering big strategic infrastructure projects, I think, than the Berlin International Airport. But Dr. Ramokgopa, I must say to you, I'm really delighted that you have taken time out of your, I think, very busy schedule to join us this afternoon. And we certainly, from the province, and I think I speak for the city, are completely committed to what you refer to as deepening relationships between spheres of government, national, province, and the city, on investment, on infrastructure, and of course on the ease of doing business, so that we can support the economy, not just in the Western Cape, but across South Africa. And so I look forward to working with you going forward in the Western Cape. Now, some of you will know that we recently published, I think, 2 outstanding documents, the Provincial Economic Review and Outlook 2020 and its twin, the Municipal Economic Review and Outlook 2020. I think these 2 excellent documents, which are known in government circles as the Pero and Mero, provide an overview of the economy in the Western Cape, which I think, like the rest of the country, has been hard hit by the COVID-19 pandemic and faces, let's be honest, considerable challenges. They also, of course, provide, I think, valuable insights on the opportunities available for growth and investment in the Western Cape. And what these documents show is that although we can look forward to a slow economic recovery, the provincial economy is also set to grow faster than the national economy in the Western Cape. We will recover and we will bounce back in the Western Cape. Our health response to the COVID-19 pandemic has been world-class, and we are now focusing our attention on economic recovery with the same level of energy and level of urgency in the Western Cape. We know that times have been tough for business, and so we have worked round the clock to back business during the pandemic, and we will certainly continue to back business as we rebuild the economy in the Western Cape. Premier Alan Winde recently delivered a special address in the Provincial Parliament in which he outlined our new priorities under 3 pillars: jobs, safety, and well-being. And we have identified these priorities in order to move forward and implement our recovery in the Western Cape. There's, of course, an enormous amount of work to be done. And while we continue to have the lowest unemployment rate in South Africa, the fact is that too many people, especially young people, are unemployed in the Western Cape. And so last week, we welcomed the scrapping of the red list and the full reopening of our international borders, which we had called for from the start, as it was killing our key source markets for tourism in the Western Cape ahead of the summer season and causing confusion and uncertainty for the travel and tourism industry, which, of course, was especially hard hit by COVID-19 in the Western Cape. And so we are going to continue to support small businesses and entrepreneurs and create that enabling environment for private sector-led growth in the Western Cape. And of course, Wesgro plays not just an important but a vital role in the effort to attract investment, grow our export, market our destinations, and of course, boost air access in the Western Cape. And so they have helped to facilitate, as we will learn in due course, billions of rands of investment, which of course have generated thousands of jobs in the Western Cape, which is, I think, incredible work. And I would really like to congratulate Tim Harris and the whole team at Wesgro on their achievement. And to echo the words of the acting chairperson, Michael Spicer, we feel indeed that we have got bang for our buck from Wesgro. I'd also like to say a special thank you to the Wesgro team for their incredible efforts, I think, during a very, very challenging year, and their exemplary response to COVID-19 as they used their learnings from the drought to quickly adapt and innovate to support businesses through this crisis. In fact, one of the last in-person meetings, if not the last in-person meetings I had, was with the team at the Invest SA one-stop shop, just before they launched the very successful COVID-19 Content Center for Business, a virtual center consisting of sector specialists and experts across the government who worked tirelessly to respond to thousands of queries from businesses trying to navigate the often complex lockdown restrictions and the new normal. I must also commend the Wesgro team for the One Day campaign, which was launched during the COVID-19 pandemic to inspire those in lockdown to consider visiting Cape Town and the Western Cape when they were able to travel at some point in the future. And of course, this campaign is now transitioned to the We Are Open campaign for domestic and international travelers, and it plays an important role in our recovery plan as we seek to support our tourism and hospitality industry by encouraging visitors to book their next holiday to Cape Town and the Western Cape. And last month, I was pleased to join the Wesgro team to relaunch the Investor Confidence campaign, which also plays an important role in our recovery plan and presents, I think, a common message to the world that both Cape Town and the Western Cape are open for business with opportunities on offer in a variety of sectors, in agriculture, in manufacture, in tech, in creative industries, and of course, in real estate. There is more to Cape Town and the Western Cape than meets the eye. We are not only a beautiful place to visit, but we are also a top business destination and an economic powerhouse on the African continent. And so we will continue to work hard to create an enabling environment for the private sector and the markets to rebuild our economy and save jobs in the Western Cape. I thank you.
Please, for MEC for Finance and Economic Development Opportunities rather in the Western Cape, David Maynier. Thank you very much for that, David. We will in a moment find out what that bang for the buck has been. I just made up a new word there. What the bang for the buck has been in terms of our investment in Wesgro, because part of the money that makes it possible for this agency to do the work it does obviously comes from not only the ratepayers of the city of Cape Town, but also the taxpayers of the Western Cape province. Tim Harris and his team are also intimately aware that they are standing between you and lunch, so they will do this in as efficient a manner as possible. We will then serve lunch for those who are attending, and then obviously field the questions after lunch has been served, if that's okay with everybody. Tim.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Africa. And yeah, we'll do. I think we can do a working lunch. We can have questions and engage a little bit with food. And the Wesgro team will do our best to make this concise. This is the kind of working end of the AGM, or the annual review event, as we call it. And really, the kind of theme of it is creativity in the time of crisis, because we're going to review the last couple of months, which aren't actually in the financial year that we're reporting on. But certainly the financial year we're reporting on gave us a huge amount of momentum going into this unprecedented crisis. And I think, Dr. Ramokgopa, let me just echo all of the thanks from everybody who's been before me. I don't think there's anybody who's busier this week, actually, in South Africa than you. This is the week of the Investment Summit. You're the President's key man on investment and infrastructure. This is your showpiece event for the year, the Annual Investment Summit. And you still took the time to actually fly down here and be with us. So maybe another round of applause for Dr. Ramokgopa.
You might notice a theme in Wesgro events in the last few months. We did our year ahead event where we looked at what was coming this year, and the keynote speaker was the new CEO of Transnet, Portia Derby. And now we have the President's lead on infrastructure and investment. We really are sending the signal that I hope you all intrinsically understand that everybody in this room does the work that we do for South Africa. We might have a brief and a mandate for the city and for the province, but at the end of the day, we're South Africans, and those of us certainly at Wesgro and the partners in the room, we do this because we know South Africa can succeed, and we're doing our small bit to make sure that that happens. And let me echo the very brief welcome and recognition of all of the stakeholders that have joined us in the room. We do have councillors from across the Western Cape, but I do need to particularly recognize Councillor Esther Groenewald because she's here representing the Council of Stellenbosch, where we are hosted today. She's also got the mandate for the economy and tourism in the Mayco. And I can't think of a better place to reflect on the last couple of months than Lanzerac. And congratulations to the Lanzerac team for winning a couple of days ago South Africa's leading wine region hotel award at the World Travel Awards. And it's not only the handful of us here in the room recognizing a kind of the idea of a COVID-friendly event, but we're actually joined by hundreds of people on our online platform, as well as a couple of journalists here in the room today from Fin24, Reuters, and Business Day. So Dr. Ramokgopa, Deputy Chairman of the Wesgro Board, Mike Spicer, Mayco member James Voss, and MEC David Maynier. We certainly have a spotlight on this question, which is, how did Wesgro do in the financial year leading up to the end of March 2020? And this is the team in the financial year leading up to the end of March 2020. There was not a bottle of sanitizer in sight. No one had to say, "You're on mute." We were all wearing pants. This was life before lockdown, right? And the Wesgro team now looks like this. This is our reality. Like every organization in the world, we've had to work out how to transition, in our case, a 40-year-old operating model into one that can work remotely. And the good news is it was quite an extraordinary experiment, but it was a successful experiment. There's three things to note about this picture. The first one is what this represents, what we've been doing in the last few months up until the time, this is the first time I put on a suit and gathered in a room with people in the last 9 months. And in that time, our productivity has spiked because Wesgro's business is about face-to-face meetings all over the province, all over the country, and all over the world. And what Zoom and the online platforms have allowed us to do is really ratchet up the efficiency and the number of meetings that we can have, the number of stakeholders, the number of investors, the number of exporters and buyers we can engage with any given day. So there's a huge productivity boost to being able to work like this, to being able to work remotely. Number two, we've also recognized that it's important to be able to work face-to-face. We lost something when we did this. We lost that face-to-face interaction and being able to look into the whites of an investor's eyes and make the case for why they should be choosing the Cape. And that's why a couple of weeks ago we announced our campaign to go safely back to the office so that we can do remote work as well as events like this face-to-face. We think that's going to be the best of both worlds for Wesgro, and it's going to be like that for a long time. Because the third benefit is this question of why work from home when you can work from Cape Town and the Western Cape. And I think remote working for the world will be a huge opportunity for the Cape because we offer so much in this destination, including a growing and productive business ecosystem, but all within the realms of this incredible scenery that we experience outside here at Lanzerac and around the whole of the Western Cape province. I think remote work is going to reposition Cape Town and the Western Cape globally as not only a tourist destination, but a business destination too. So I described the event that we did with Portia Derby looking ahead. This is the event that we do looking at the financial year that came before. So this is what happened in that financial year. We're dealing with 1 April 2019 to 31 March 2020, and we're tracking here the JSE all-share index over that period. It was a fairly good year up until the last month of the financial year. Moderate performance on the stock exchange, fairly flat. We had the high point of winning the Rugby World Cup until that last month of the financial year, March, things fell off a cliff. And they fell off a cliff because of what's happened since then. This unbelievable experience that none of us were anticipating, going through an unprecedented crisis reflected by the decline in the JSE. And since then, a gradual recovery as we've moved through those lockdown levels 5 down to level 1, where we find ourselves now. So what I'm going to do is focus on the blue part of the graph, which is the financial year we're actually reviewing at this AGM. And then at the end, together with some teammates from Wesgro, we're going to just reflect on the last 6 months of this year. So let's start with investment promotion. Dr. Ramokgopa, this is the key area for you and the team sitting at National, run by James Milne as part of Yao Pepra's team. 18 new investment projects to the tune of more than 2 billion rand in the period. They created almost 1,500 jobs. And what's important is the degree to which these deals are increasingly landed through a collaboration with National. We have the Invest SA one-stop shop located next to the Wesgro office in St. George's Mall. They had a hand in 30% of the investment deals landed by this team in the financial year concerned. So you'll see that momentum there, Dr. Ramokgopa. This is how we navigated the crisis, because we were landing multiple deals right through the year going into COVID, including what is possibly the largest deal in Wesgro's history during the financial year. Part of the investment promotion team is the Agribusiness Unit. This unit's funded specifically by the Department of Agriculture here in the province. It's run by Amanda Shire, who's actually currently acting as head for the entire investment unit, while James Milne has his first baby. He had a son last week, and congratulations from all of us here to James. A round of applause for James. But the agribusiness team, run by Amanda, had a very strong year as well. 6 investment deals landed to the tune of more than 500 million rand, creating more than 600 jobs, and particularly important, recruiting 34 quality investment projects into the pipeline, deals we'll be working on together with Dr. Ramokgopa and his team over the future. And the agri sector is super important. You'll see it here, and you'll see it coming on in more slides, including the international trade performance. Dean and Cooney, part of Yao's team, runs the export team at Wesgro. They normally do 40 export missions a year, taking our companies into market to help them grow their global sales. In this year, they use those missions to deliver 37 signed business agreements. That's when an exporter signs a new export order working with the Wesgro export team. Together, that represents more than 3 billion rands worth of export value, creating almost 1,000 jobs in the Cape. And you'll remember from previous events, if you've been to them, 5 years ago, we started working on what we call outward foreign direct investment, helping Cape companies expand their footprint on the African continent. And we were pleased in our export team to help 7 Cape companies do that, investing almost 500 million rand on the African continent to position the Cape as a leading business hub for Africa. But we're also the destination marketing organization for the Cape. So Lebika Skierman is acting head of the DMO right now. The leisure tourism team is run by Inge Dijkman. And for much of the period that we're looking at today, or some of the period, we had Margie Whitehouse running this team. She's unfortunately moved on, but she's left a really strong legacy and a really strong team that had quite an extraordinary period. 46 tourism destination initiatives supported by the team, generating almost 1 billion rands worth of coverage for the destination, supporting almost 50 leisure events across the province, helping to secure geographic spread. Cape Town is an extraordinary tourism success story globally. How do we make sure travelers who come to Cape Town experience all of the regions of the Western Cape? We do that primarily through a series of events that we sponsor around the province. Those events help to create almost 5,000 temporary jobs and bring almost 300,000 visitors to the region. The other part of the DMO is the Convention Bureau, run by Corne Koch. It landed 52 bids in the financial year. Just an extraordinary effort, going head-to-head with other cities and regions and winning bids to bring these major conferences to the Cape. Together, they'll have an impact of more than 1 billion rand and bring almost 40 1,000 delegates to the Cape. So clearly, going into the COVID crisis, extraordinary position as a breadbasket of Africa, as a leading investment hub, as the business hub of the continent, as a bucket list tourist destination, and as the leading conferencing destination in Africa. Film promotion, rounding out that excellence of delivery. Monica Rovik runs our film and media promotion team, also as part of Yao's teams. They landed more than 2 billion rands worth of production value, working with Rudy and other major producers across the Cape, across 5 major declaration sets that will create more than 2,000 full-time equivalent jobs, and also started helping film companies think about their work as an export, helping to train more than 500 film production companies and media houses in understanding how they can sign more international business by delivering a version of the export team's export advancement program. So again, a story of leadership, the leading production hub on the continent continuing to extend their performance. And it's all underpinned by a team that's come up a few times already today, the team at Cape Town Air Access. When Cape Town Air, this is the collaboration behind Cape Town Air Access, and Dr. Ramokgopa, it includes your partners at national level. It's not just a Cape Town, not just a Western Cape initiative. We've been partnered with South African Tourism, we've been partnered with AXA, Dion at the team at Cape Town International from the beginning of this project. So it's a truly collaborative project representing 3 spheres of government, but also 7 major private sector corporates in the Cape who've come together in this grand collaboration to double the route connectivity to Cape Town International Airport in the last 5 years. And this is what I mean by doubling it. When we started this project in 2014, this was the route network that we had serving Cape Town International. Hard to make the case that you're a business hub for Africa or an international destination when that's what your non-stop route network looks like. 5 years later, going into the COVID lockdown, that's what happened. An extraordinary transformation in connectivity. And this financial year concerned was no different. 2 airlines joined us in the period, United Airlines with that historic new flight to New York, and Westair, which is the new Namibian carrier. And this is probably the first time in the history that New York, Oranje and Santolina have been listed on the same slide, because those were 3 new destinations that were connected by our new partners, and we also helped 3 existing carriers expand their routes. All in all, just in this work in that year, that's 44,000 new seats to the Cape Town network, generating 165 million in tourist spend and 400 additional jobs in the province. Also, we wanted to talk about cargo because it's become such an important part of our story in lockdown, and a 54% increase in cargo capacity since the project began. So I think you'll agree, extraordinary momentum going into the crisis. But a lot of what I've just mentioned stopped when this happened. The bottom fell out of the JSE. It became obvious in March that we were facing an unprecedented crisis. On the 16th of March, we had our first planning meeting together with DDAT and the team at the city to say, how do we navigate this? 10 days later, the president announced the first lockdown, and we moved quickly the next day, releasing together with our partners a site that Judy's going to talk about in a moment, supportbusiness.coza, where we started helping Cape companies navigate the lockdown. A couple of days later, launched the COVID Support Finder, and then the PPE marketplace. And once we got to level 2, launched the Cape Export Network. You're going to hear about all of these initiatives while you enjoy your lunch. And this is the point that I wanted to leave you with. How do you take the momentum from the financial year that we're speaking about today and use it to navigate the crisis that we've been through in the last 6 months? And just to let you know what that momentum translates to when you actually do successfully navigate a crisis. When the president announced the opening of international travel on the 11th of November last month, between 9 o'clock and midnight that evening, just after he made the announcement, there were 190 international tickets sold to Cape Town International Airport. So if you want to understand the pent-up demand in the system that's been blocked by lockdown, that is it, an incredible demand for travelers to come back to the Cape. The performance through the 6 months, this is from April to September this year, is not actually in our annual review, it's not in our annual report, but we did think since we were gathering here, we should review how it's gone. And you'll start to see some of that resilience built by the momentum and the creativity that the teams delivered on in the last 6 months. So firstly, destination positioning. In a time when tourism was blocked for most of the last 6 months, they delivered almost 100 million rand of coverage, maintaining Cape Town and the Western Cape as a bucket list destination. You're going to hear about that from some of my colleagues in a second. The investment team in those 6 months landed 3.5 billion rand worth of investment during lockdown. That will create 462 direct jobs, and they added 40 billion rands worth of catalytic projects to Dr. Ramokgopa's long list. That if those all land with the support of National, that's 29,000 new jobs for the Cape. The export team also, more than 2 billion rands worth of exports facilitated during lockdown without doing a single physical mission. Just an unbelievable example of creativity and productivity under lockdown. Tourism, 160 million of economic value in destination marketing, 10 leisure events supported while people weren't able to meet face-to-face. That's because we were doing those events online. We were doing them on Zoom. We were making sure the destinations across the province remained functional and were able to host guests online. The Convention Bureau secured 6 bids for conferences in the lockdown. What that means is that 6 of our major association partners are planning to bring their conferences to the Cape in the future. That is an incredible light at the end of the tunnel for all of us feeling like lockdown was overwhelming us. And obviously innovated in the period with an extraordinary global conference that, like we're doing today, was a blend of hybrid, or a hybrid event, a blend of face-to-face and online meeting. And then across the whole business model at Wesgro, really transitioning a 40-year-old face-to-face operation into a digital operation. 99 webinars hosted, 8,000 attendees on those webinars, meeting 630 investors on Zoom, helping 271 companies navigate the lockdown, hosting 11 virtual events similar to this, 17 virtual missions, taking our exporters into market, more than 300 of them, training almost 3,000 companies during lockdown in how they can become exporters once lockdown is over, and engaging with 25 domestic tourism, travel trade, and 14 international tourism, travel trade in the performance. So even in the financial year, rather. So even though we're looking at the preceding period in this annual review, we thought it was important as the Wesgro team to just remind you of what's been going on more recently, to unpack some of that extraordinary performance. I'm going to call on 4 of our colleagues now, Jean, Judy, Yao, and Labika. But just from me personally, thank you to the staff for the extraordinary effort they put in. Thank you to Mike and the Wesgro board for supporting us through this period. And of course, thank you to David and James and the funders of Wesgro who have enabled this performance in collaboration with you. The program director, I'm going to hand over to Jean Skeltimer, the head of our marketing unit, to give you an insight into some of those projects as you enjoy your lunch. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Tim. I'm going to click through to a 10 reasons to manufacture video, and then I'll step back up again. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to very briefly talk you through some of the campaigns that we've put together in the last 6 months, starting with one that we called the Cape Confidence Campaign, which ran from the lockdown period and is still ongoing. So here, we really needed to reassure business stakeholders with a decreased sense of confidence that the system, both public and private, has the capabilities to get us through the lockdown period, and that there are opportunities that exist here in the future. We all know there have been a lot of negative headlines in the last 6 months. So we decided, how are we going to do this? We're going to do this in 2 ways. We're going to show the impressive response of our government against world-class destinations and showing just what we achieved during the lockdown. The second thing that we needed to do was we needed to rally our expat community living in Cape Town and get them to tell their stories of why Cape Town and the Western Cape truly is a place of more. And when you have an expat voice who's telling an authentic story, they could be in any other country in the world, and they choose to be in Cape Town and the Western Cape. So these are really powerful narratives that we need to get out there to debunk some of the negative headlines that we've seen in the last 6 months. The next campaign that I'll talk to you about is called Investor Confidence Campaign. We launched this in January with our partners. It's 4 levels of government involved, and a critical question we had to ask ourselves with this campaign is, how do we inspire confidence in Cape Town, not only as a tourism destination, but as an economic powerhouse and a business destination? In an uncertain world, how do we deliver in a credible way? So if you shoot back 20 years, the very fact that you could afford a large-scale medium immediately made you a credible organization. You think about how that has changed now. If you think about confidence and trust, you would have no doubt met with a person or an organization time and time again. So armed with this insight, we said to ourselves, well, how do we simulate this online, this kind of pathway to trust? Well, we didn't start on a zero base to begin with. In 2019, we ran a Cape Confidence campaign, which reached an audience of 16.5 million unique users. We had demographics, we had companies, we knew which sectors they were interested in, and so we could immediately start targeting the low-hanging fruit with our messages. More than that, we needed to think about what channel we were going to use to make this most effective. And so we embarked on using Teads, which is a programmatic AI channel that serves to a pool of publishers that our audience are already engaging in. For example, the New York Times, or if they're interested in Cape business news, we're able to serve content to them directly where they enjoy consuming it the most. And what this does is it breaks down the route to confidence, because you're leveraging brands that have existing equity. And then we came to a messaging challenge, and this was a particularly interesting one, because if you shoot back 6 months ago, we were ready to go out with just our proof points in priority sectors, which are pretty powerful. But what we had to do here is say, how can we really capture the minds of our domestic audience? For example, Gauteng and KZN, what can we say about the destination that will really draw them in, perhaps get them to expand into Cape Town, the Western Cape, and take that share? And so what we did was we put together a messaging framework around our sound governance, our great connectivity, the fact that we are the most energy secure province in the country. So you will see the Investor Confidence campaign playing out on digital channels. It's a lead generation campaign, and it has achieved so far in the last month 50,000 clicks to our website, investcape.com, as well as 246 lead forms that have been filled out so far, and those go through to our IP team and to our investment facilitation team, head up by Salman Kaji. So, changing gears, we now move on to tourism, and thanks for sort of bringing some of that up earlier, Tim. The one-day campaign, a campaign that was created in a crisis when our tourism industry, as you know, was extremely hard hit by the lockdown. So the challenge here as marketers was, how do we engage an armchair audience? You've got people sitting at home. They can't travel, but they're longing to travel. How do we remain top of mind and build familiarity in a time of crisis, as well as support our tourism industry? So what we did was we decided to take it virtual. We created virtual tours across the regions. Africa was a tour participator on those. And what we chose to do at the end of those was to monetize digital through the SnapScan mechanism, allowing audiences, even internationally, to contribute a gesture to our guides that were unable to work during the lockdown. The next thing that we embarked on was creating audio journeys, podcasts, very exciting medium, particularly amongst the growing millennial set. And it allowed us to really create rich, immersive storytelling, to put together Apple podcasts from all areas of the regions, and we had quite a smart approach in terms of our media. We ran it at night when people were about to drift off to sleep, and you all know we sit and scroll through our phones, and we managed to achieve significant downloads of our podcasts, and the science says that whatever you think about before you go off to sleep, you will most likely dream about. The exciting thing about this campaign is it has picked up 2 Creative Circle Awards, 2 Lurie's nominations, we're holding thumbs there, and a prestigious gold at City Nation Place last week. And that really is exciting for me because it tells me that little old Cape Town and the Western Cape really can compete on the global stage, and we're incredibly proud of that. But more importantly, it has opened up a new way of working for our tour guides who have been doing things in the same way for many, many years. And then all of a sudden, overnight, we're open and we have to frantically change gears, and there are lots of panicked phone calls. And we need to entice our domestic audience to start traveling again, literally overnight. The aim here was to kind of capitalize on an audience that we had in 2019. If you think of 2019 as a good year, we had a 60-40 split between our local and international audiences, telling us that we had this really loyal audience that we needed to engage quite quickly. There were some human truths that sat at the bottom of it, the fact that people had been locked down in their homes, they had this lockdown fatigue, they were dying to get this faraway feeling. They also had holidays overseas cancelled. And what we wanted to really convey is that Cape Town and the Western Cape, with its depth and breadth of experiences and offer, really is a world in one province. And why go overseas when you can come to Cape Town and the Western Cape and see the world? The value proposition attached to this and our promotional element is called Kids Stay Free. It was created to address some of the interprovincial barriers of cost that we know are sitting with this audience, and I can proudly tell you that we have had 994 confirmed bookings through our campaign microsite with Travel Start in just the last 3 weeks, and we are going to continue with the momentum. And the really exciting part is that's driving to regions such as the Karoo, as well as all regions of the Western Cape. Before I play the campaign videos, I will just introduce the next speaker, who's Judy Lane, who heads up our online reputation management at Wesgro. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. We just need to cast our minds back a little bit now to March. On the 16th of March, we held a meeting to discuss the province's response to COVID and the looming lockdown. Within a few days, 30 sectorial and communication experts had been assembled. At that moment, we didn't know what to expect. The only thing we knew is that we had to build a plane while we were flying. A day after we went into lockdown level 5, the COVID Content Centre team launched supportbusiness.co.za. Our role was simple. We had to use the power of digital, collaborative problem solving, and partnerships to support business during a very difficult time. We had one critical success outcome, and that was to predict and understand what challenges businesses would face during lockdown, and then build digital solutions around it to support them. Our first challenge was the ever-changing regulatory landscape. Never before had regulations changed so often. What we did is we used social listening, so we went online and we started to understand what questions people were asking. We had a dedicated hotline, which people would email 24/7, and our teams met with businesses. And from that, we started to build insights. From those insights, we started to develop daily FAQs, which we then published on our site. Within a few weeks, we had over 500,000 page views of our FAQs. The second challenge was the packaged interventions that were being launched by the South African government, Western Cape government, private sector, and banks. Businesses were unsure what was applicable to them, how to apply, where to apply, and what paperwork to do. So the team came up with the COVID-19 Support Finder. It was a simple tool. It asked you 5 questions, and then the platform would deliver a list of interventions applicable to you with links to where you could find the paperwork, what you had to apply, and more information. The World Bank gave the team and the tools special acknowledgement for work done to support businesses, and they used the IP for other African countries to build a similar tool. The next challenge we faced was the procurement of PPE. Never before had businesses had to procure PPE. So what happened is you just saw this overwhelming response on the internet. It was fragmented, unvetted, and time-consuming for businesses to find the products they need. So what the team did is they launched the PPE marketplace, and once again, using a simple tool and platform of answering 5 questions, we could link willing buyers and willing sellers and to shorten the process. To date, over $1.5 million worth of quotes has been put through the platform. The next response to the pandemic is the Cape Export Network. This is what we've developed in partnership with Wines of South Africa to support specifically the wine industry. Through this platform, we will use the power of digital marketing and what's known as social selling to drive South African wines into untapped markets and guide recovery. The last platform is the Safe Travels. To wish someone safe travels is to wish them good fortune during a trip. Why we travel, I love to explore, the freedom we feel, the memories we collect. Our reasons have not changed for why we want to travel. But what has changed is our confidence in how we travel and when we travel. We've built the Safe Travels website to help answer questions potential travelers may have when thinking about coming to Cape Town and the Western Cape. Using the power of social listening and in real time understanding what questions people are asking, where are their concerns, and then building content which we then release immediately across different platforms into conversations and searches. We can hopefully rebuild confidence and get people to enjoy the wonderful place Jean has just showed us. And lastly, I'd just like to thank my team who's been involved in the Cape Export Networks, Support Business, and Safe Travels. You've played a pivotal role in supporting businesses not only in the Western Cape and South Africa. And next, Yao Pepra, Chief Business Officer.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I guess ordinarily I would be speaking about what we had done in the past, but I think Tim covered that well. And also, this is no ordinary year. We had our year planned. We had the province had gone through a process where we sat with Rashida and Ilse, and we had through the whole process we decided that it was going to be an export-led growth that was going to lead our narrative for the next couple of years. We had the budgets put together for it, we had our plans afoot, and as you know, what happened thereafter. So what it meant is we had to shift how we operated. And what I quite liked is how the team actually took to it. The exports team was the first team out the blocks. they started with virtual missions, outward missions. We just thought we'll use the technology that was available to us and see what we could do with it. Funnily enough, which is I suppose not really funny, the team's first virtual missions was to African countries, which makes a lot of sense because the rest of the continent is our biggest export partner. Through that, we learned, we iterated. I mean, we even did a virtual wine tasting, which is something that had never been done or thought of ever. I mean, like just how you get the bottles across, how are we going to work with our diplomatic officers abroad? But it worked like a charm. And on the back of that, a whole lot more other people have tried different things. We're actually currently doing I think we're doing a wine or spirits a mission out to Asia this week. So that was the export promotion team. I think I might have spoken about our e-portal portal tool that we were going to go put in place this year. The tender process is currently being finalized, which is great because it's going to revolutionize how our Western Cape exporters trade with the rest of the world. So export was going to be the way we were going to trade ourselves out of the situation that we find ourselves in. And the district unit, which was set up about a year and a half ago, which is made up of 2 people that are meant to cover about 29 municipalities inside the Western Cape, they also took to this and they transitioned quite well. So there's a lot of stuff that was being done by Judy and the team at the COVID Content Center. There was a lot of people that were looking for this information in the municipalities. So what the team did was, through economic cluster engagements, which were quite regular, which is very different because the team is made up of 2 people, they had to go out and try and get this message across. So using our technology, we managed to set up meetings with these municipalities. But it also helped us because it helped us build better relationships with the municipalities. So one of the things that we did do is, because we weren't traveling, we had a bit of extra money. So what we did was we repurposed that for doing export advancement programs, because if we're going to be doing an export-led growth agenda, we needed to get more companies that were ready to export. So we got, I think, about 100 companies trained up so far, thanks to Tofik and his team. I had to give him a mention because he's looking at me like, mention me, please mention me. Anyway, so so we got that right. And then Judy's mentioned a lot of the stuff that the management promotion team that did, which was the PPE marketplace. I mean, it was a mess. Not even the PPE. I'll start off with the fund finder. It was a mess because every time anyone phoned us, they were looking for money. They was like, "There's so much out there, but we don't know which ones apply to us." And so that was quite it was a game changer in a way, because and what I liked about that as well is the fact that we did, in as much as we funded it, we didn't just keep it for the Western Cape. We opened it up to the rest of the country. I think Pretty Boy was over there, was on TV, punting it to, no, you, Tim, was out there punting it out to the rest of the country. Also linked to the marketplace was this thing called the Maskathon. It was, I want to mention it because it was working with one of our most, I suppose, engaged corporates in the Western Cape, First Rand. We sat with them and we co-created this thing where we could ask people to either fund masks being sold or being produced, so that we could actually help the identified hotspots serve the population that could ill afford to buy these masks. It was quite a, I think, if I'm not mistaken, I can't remember the numbers out over here, there were about 220,000 masks pledged and about 72,000 Rand donated, which is great for this part of the world as well. What we did also is we linked it to Madiba Day, which was great. On the film team, I mean, I don't want to leave the film team out, though. And in as much as they were just as hamstrung as the tourism team, they also took to their work quite hard. They really spent a lot of time lobbying for small productions to come into the Western Cape, because film is sadly quite an underrated industry. You know, it creates so many jobs, and by letting a handful of film execs come into the country, we could unlock billions of Rand, which would lead to thousands of jobs being facilitated. But to do that, we needed the one-stop shop. So Salman and his team, I suppose I went with them, but last year we went to Dubai and Mauritius to go and visit countries that had actually had a one-stop shop, physical space, but they had turned it, and we learned how they had made e-procurement or e-government or e-governance their way of dealing with queries from companies. So on the back of that, this year we've actually set up the first virtual one-stop shop, which is really a procurement booking system where companies can link up with the 14 agencies that are part of the one-stop shop. It's great though, because I mean, we were struggling in terms of getting through the resource constraint. We were struggling to get all the partners physically in the one-stop shop all the time. So this has helped us fill that gap. Anyway, I don't want to ramble on. On that note, I think I want to hand over to Lebika for her to carry on about the tourism response. Thanks.
So Tim's given me less than a minute to speak, and I've got the penguins. The main highlights, I'm the last speaker, so we're going to wrap up very soon. The main highlights I want to talk about is on the one-day campaign, when we went from one day into the We Are Open, and we're now building it into the international campaign, I think it's very important to mention that when we do the tourism marketing, we do white label marketing, which means that any business or local government can use our collateral, and that helps us to get better spend out of the public sector money that we're using. So, my apologies. And then with that, we've also built the collateral from a base of wide open spaces so that we can use that collateral. And Jean and I are working for usage of the collateral up to a 5-year period. So that is also, we're not doing these once-off short burst campaigns that don't go far. The in-market activations that we did for the domestic campaign, we were the first in-market in last month. We went to Johannesburg and KZN. That was one of the most important things that MEC Maynier said, let's be the first in market. Then just on that Bali video that you saw, the most important part is the amount of viewership that we got out of it. Just as an example, for social media exposure, that video was already watched 120,000 times, which is absolutely remarkable. In terms of the Convention Bureau, our highlights, we've got 2 awards in the past month. One has been in October, the most innovative business tourism destination in the African Tourism Leadership Forum Awards. And the second is Africa's Best MICE Destination Award for 2020. So I think that is quite remarkable accomplishments during this time. Is that less than 1 minute?
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Lebika. Thank you, Yao. Thank you, Judy. Thank you, Jean. And thank you, Tim, for your hard work that you've obviously demonstrated over the last while. We've taken up far too much of your time. Lesiba, you sent your question through our Ask a Question button on Vimeo. If you have any more, by the way, keep on using that facility, and we'll make sure that your questions for Dr. Ramokgopa are going to be answered. And we're going to invite those attending here to please join us for coffee in the reception area so that you can have your questions answered as well. It's going to be a tough 2020-2021. It's required of all of us to do our bit to make sure that we generate as much money and economy and jobs and everything else that comes with it for our region and continue in the Cape confidence that we have. Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful Monday. Oh, a warrant of arrest has officially been issued for Bushiri and Mrs. Bushiri to be served. And Advocate Skukuza is waiting to find out from Raymond Zondo, who in 24 years of being on the bench has never been asked to recuse himself. We'll find out after 2 o'clock. Bye-bye.
Welcome to the Western Cape, South Africa, your gateway to the African continent. Open for agri-processing. Our beautiful region is one of the largest exporters of agricultural goods in Africa. Open for maritime. The Western Cape is home to 3 ports. Saldanha Bay Port is the first free port in South Africa and has an industrial development zone while Cape Town's boat building industry is known globally for its excellent craftsmanship and innovative designs. Open for manufacturing. Our aerospace technology companies are supplying some of the world's major space organizations. This is where innovative design thinking meets quality skilled engineering, not to mention established export markets in Africa and the world. Open for tech. We are Africa's leading digital hub. The Cape Town Stellenbosch tech ecosystem is the most productive on the continent. This is also home to world-class universities and global tech giants. Open for creative industries. The Western Cape is a mecca for creative storytelling with thousands of locations to choose from. We are home to the first world-class custom-built film studio complex in Africa. Africa's leading animation studio that keeps winning on the global stage is also based here. Open for real estate. Our inspiring province attracts people from all over South Africa and the world, making our property value the highest in the country. Major international hotel groups have built here, and billions of dollars in developments have been approved. For innovation, opportunity, and growth, the Western Cape is open. Now it's time for you to open for business.